So, on to part 3 of the Commando build. So since the last video, I put another coat of the filler primer on top of the black and green, since I was going to experiment with glazing spot putty that's normally used on automotive projects for buffing out any scratches, but in this sense I'm going to use it to get rid of the print lines. This stuff does have a pretty intense smell to it, so if you are doing your own helmet, I would suggest putting on a mask. It does dry quickly, which is great, but I still waited overnight just in case it was still drying underneath the thicker spots I put. After all of it was dried, I went outside with the mask and glasses to sand off with my detail sander. I used 400 grit on it and it came off relatively easy. A fine powder came off of it, but what was left was a really smooth finish, which is great because the amount of time it would have taken me to spray on the primer to get this smooth would cost me a lot more time and money just with the amount of cans I'd be going through. And with it coming off so easy, it was really helpful because even in the tougher to sand spots, it was really easy to reach. You could get these tubes at an automotive store, normally where like the Bondo and the fiberglass resin's at. And again, probably a lot cheaper than spending so much money on that spray primer. So after finishing the smoothing with the Bondo, I wanted to experiment with wet sanding. I used 1500 and 1000 grit, which may have been too fine, but after doing so, the helmet itself was very smooth, similar to that of anything polished. Going back to the spray booth, I just sprayed a final coat of the filler primer just to have a solid base before I did the final paint job for the helmet. One thing I noticed when doing the coat of primer was how well each piece took the paint. It was very solid and uniform compared to before where you could see it soak into each of the lines. Even here when applying the black paint, you could see almost a reflection from the wet look, which was a huge relief because it shows that it paid off with the Bondo and the sanding and how much times I had to do it over to make sure it was as smooth as I wanted it to be. I'm only showing myself doing the first coat of black paint, but I did do 2 coats. Some parts I did 3 just because I realized I missed a few of the finer details, but in general, yeah, 2 coats is best just to keep that color, because even here you could see the green not really pop as much as the black, so I just did a light coat so no drips were to come in case I tried putting it on too heavy. After each part was finished spraying, I let it sit on the box overnight just to make sure it was dry before I went to weathering, especially with the winter temperatures we're having, and really let that shine of the paint show through. This spray tent and the thing I'm spraying on you could find online. It's really easy, especially without having to deal with overspray. So after finally completing the paint job of this helmet, you could see how smooth the final look is. In person, it's even more glossy, which is great and very satisfying on how it looks. Looks really clean, out of a factory almost. But although I do like it, I am gonna weather it. So I'm here with 1000 grit and even some 1500, some 320, just to rough up the edges and sand off the green and the black to show the gray primer beneath it. So it looks like it, seen some age and some beat over time. This part was almost the most satisfying, and reason being was sanding each corner and edge really defined the helmet, almost like shading when drawing, just to bring out the edges and give character to the helmet, if that makes sense. Another good reason on why to use gray primer instead of black or white for the filler primer was when sanding off the top coat, in this case the green and black, the gray does show through and it looks like a metal finish versus having just a black or white primer, which doesn't really give that final look. So after sanding the edges, I'm going ahead and doing a black wash to the whole helmet, which is really watered down acrylic paint with a bit of a wide brush, so I'm using about a 1 inch, putting it over the whole helmet and then wiping it down with a paper towel. What I think this adds to my helmet is a bit of that grease and grime that would be on a aged piece of equipment, especially in the crevices, any more to detail marks. And this worked out great too, because those spots I had just sanded are able to soak up any black paint, so when I wipe it off it still has a bit of that accent. And it dulls down the green, so it's not as strong as it was when it's completely gloss. After doing this once or twice on each side and wiping off the excess, it did give a look I was happy with, which you'll see here. And the only thing I did off camera besides this was add the gold marks on the top of the helmet and put the last few pieces, which are just the clips on the visor and the side attachments. So yeah, that completes my Commando helmet build. This is something I'm happy with. It took about a month or two to complete with a lot of things learned, but I'm happy. It looks great compared to this raw print I have on the left of the screen. You can see the difference from the before and after. So I hope to do more of these down the line. If you do like these video series, please let me know by either commenting your ideas of what to do next or by subscribing to the channel. Both will help just to see the activity from both yourselves and others. But yeah, thank you for all your support on the comments. It's been a fun 2 months.